Most mornings don't begin in silence. They begin with tension. The mind races before the body moves, planning, worrying, and rushing ahead of the day. Thoughts of what might go wrong, of obligations imagined or anticipated, tug attention away from the present. Calm feels distant, as if the day has already claimed it before it begins. The challenge is not the day itself. It is how we meet it, how we hold our mind steady while the world tugs in every direction. In the quiet moments between these impulses, there is a choice. Stoicism teaches that peace doesn't come from controlling what happens outside, but from mastering how we respond. By noticing which thoughts deserve attention and which can pass like clouds, space opens for clarity. Even small routines, breathing, walking, preparing, become exercises in presence, practices that restore the mind to calm and alignment. The tension of the morning is a reflection of what we allow in thought, not of reality itself. Each deliberate pause, each conscious breath, reclaims a rhythm that is ours to set. By observing the mind instead of reacting to every impulse, we discover that calm is not distant or conditional. It exists in the spaces we create, in the moments we allow for presence, and in the awareness that we can begin the day on our own terms. The pace of life often feels imposed upon us, as if the world itself demands our constant attention. Yet urgency is rarely external. It is constructed by the mind. Thoughts whisper insistently, "You must hurry, you cannot pause, you are already behind." These mental pressures dominate perception only if we allow them to. The body does not need to match the mind's frantic tempo. A deliberate step, a slowed breath, a brief moment of stillness is enough to reset the internal rhythm. We are not captive to imagined urgencies. The Stoics observed that much of our tension is self-inflicted. As Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." By refusing to give in to the mind's chatter, we reclaim the power to navigate life intentionally, anchoring the day not in haste, but in calm deliberation. Even when we recognize that urgency is self-generated, awareness alone is insufficient. Habits of hurried thinking run deep, formed over years of automatic reactions. Mornings can start with a mental checklist longer than the day itself, tasks multiplying before the body even leaves the bed. Yet each moment presents a choice: to act deliberately instead of reflexively, to pause before speaking, to inhale fully before moving, to align hands and mind. These are not indulgences, they are acts of cultivation. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When the body and mind move together in measured rhythm, the mind quiets, and clarity emerges naturally. Even small acts of deliberate motion or awareness reinforce inner freedom and resilience. Our reactions shape life more than the events themselves. A late message, a sudden inconvenience, a minor frustration, these are neutral until we assign weight to them. The Stoics called this the second arrow. The first is what happens, unavoidable. The second is the judgment we apply. Each morning offers a chance to practice restraint, to pause, to breathe, and to choose thoughtful response over impulse. Emotional turbulence arises not from circumstance, but from interpretation. When reactions are moderated, clarity remains, and decisions emerge from composure rather than agitation. This internal mastery transforms the day, allowing life to unfold with steadiness, intentionality, and freedom. The mind carries remnants of yesterday, regrets, unfinished conversations, lingering frustrations. Each morning offers the opportunity to release them, to meet the day unburdened. Attachment to what has passed only weighs us down, diverting attention from what is present. By letting go, even temporarily, we reclaim energy, focus, and calm. A simple reflection, acknowledging what is behind, then setting it aside, frees the mind. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, highlighting how the mind exaggerates burdens it holds onto. By releasing yesterday's weight, the mind feels lighter, perception sharpens, and each moment becomes available to meet life with awareness rather than habit or regret. Kindness toward oneself is not indulgence. It is the foundation for resilience. Self-criticism clouds judgment and fuels inner turbulence. By treating oneself with patience and compassion, the mind stabilizes, creating a platform for wise and deliberate action. A morning begun with gentleness inward ripples outward, shaping decisions, interactions, and perception throughout the day. Carl Jung observed, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become," reinforcing the idea that identity and experience are forged through conscious choice. Internal kindness reduces emotional friction, strengthens focus, and allows responses to arise from clarity rather than anxiety. This habitual practice nurtures composure that carries into every engagement, no matter how small or significant. Awareness, not force, is the key to control. Attempting to manufacture calm through sheer willpower often backfires, creating tension and resistance. Observing the mind, understanding its boundaries, and directing attention to what lies within our control cultivates natural tranquility. Each movement, each breath, each considered choice transforms ordinary routines into practices of mastery over the mind itself. Each of these lessons, slowing, observing, accepting, pausing, releasing, being kind, and practicing awareness, interweaves into a continuous habit of presence. Morning becomes less a series of obligations and more a canvas for conscious choice. The rhythm of life can be met with steadiness rather than rush, clarity rather than confusion, intentionality rather than habit. When you approach the day awake to your mind and responses, life unfolds with less struggle. Calm is not distant or conditional. It is already here, waiting in the space between thought and action. If you have found resonance in these reflections, consider subscribing, not as a routine click, but as a conscious step toward practicing presence, cultivating awareness, and navigating life with intentional calm. Each small reflection becomes a guide, helping you act with clarity, resilience, and quiet strength as you move through the world. In practice, moving deliberately also cultivates clarity of thought. Hasty movement fragments awareness, scattering attention across multiple imagined futures and past regrets. By contrast, intentional action, performed with measured care, consolidates attention, aligning thought, perception, and execution. The mind, like a sanctuary, becomes accessible through deliberate pacing, quiet observation, and recognition of what is within our control. Each slowed step, each conscious breath, strengthens the neural and psychological pathways that support resilience, focus, and calm. The simple awareness that we are choosing each moment, rather than being swept along by thought, becomes a source of stability, reducing reactivity and fostering a profound sense of agency. Finally, the transformation that begins in deliberate movement radiates outward into experience. We begin to act from a place of centeredness rather than urgency, to respond rather than react, and to inhabit our mornings with a sense of autonomy and calm. The compulsion to rush diminishes, not because the world changes, but because the mind's interpretation of it has shifted. Each choice to move with attention reinforces a broader pattern of self-mastery, and the day itself becomes less a series of pressures and more a landscape in which presence, clarity, and resilience can flourish. As Seneca reminds us, "He who is brave is free," and here bravery manifests not in grand gestures, but in the quiet refusal to surrender to imagined urgencies, in the small acts of deliberate pacing that preserve the mind's equilibrium. Thoughts arrive unbidden, sometimes insistent, appearing in the mind as if they carry the weight of obligation. A fleeting concern about a meeting, a replay of yesterday's conversation, a subtle self-criticism. Each thought can feel urgent, demanding immediate attention, as though failing to act would somehow result in disaster. Yet the true power of a thought is not inherent. It exists only in the authority we grant it. The mind, accustomed to chasing every impulse, rarely pauses to notice that many of these intrusions are neither commands nor reality. They are transient impressions, brief appearances in consciousness that do not require action. Stoicism teaches that discernment lies in distinguishing what is within our control from what is not. By observing the mind without immediate obedience, we create a space of awareness that allows judgment to be applied rather than reaction to be automatic. When we first attempt to step back from thought, the mind can feel restless, even frantic, as if withdrawing attention is a deprivation. Thoughts that normally go unchallenged now draw attention simply by being observed. There is a subtle shift in perspective when we recognize that thinking does not obligate doing. A worry about an outcome may pass like a cloud moving across a vast sky, leaving space behind it for clarity. Each moment of observation reinforces the distinction between perception and action, between judgment and impulse. By deliberately choosing which thoughts to engage and which to release, we influence the emotional tone of the day, coloring the mind with steadiness rather than agitation. Our modern lives are saturated with stimuli that encourage immediate reaction, making it easy to conflate intrusion with urgency. A notification, a passing memory, a sudden urge to respond, all these are cues that the mind interprets as demands. Yet the more we observe, the more apparent it becomes that very few of these impulses require action in the moment. Observing thought is an exercise in self-authorship, a recognition that identity is forged through conscious selection rather than automatic compliance with passing impulses. The mind's activity is constant, but the freedom lies in deciding which movements deserve energy. By cultivating awareness, we strengthen the capacity to pause, to examine, and to respond deliberately, creating a mental terrain that supports calm, rather than reacting in ways that perpetuate restlessness. This practice also reframes our understanding of worry and desire. A fleeting concern about what might happen or what might be lacking can feel consuming, yet when approached with discernment, its intensity diminishes. Thoughts are like clouds drifting across the sky. Their presence does not alter the sky itself, and the space they pass through remains intact. The mind that learns to observe without immediate obedience begins to see impermanence in its own processes. Seneca observed that we are often more frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality, pointing to the tendency of the mind to amplify threats that exist only as constructs. By allowing thoughts to pass without reaction, we create a buffer between stimulus and response, preserving calm and facilitating clarity. The skill lies not in silencing thought, which is impossible, but in changing our relationship to it, choosing observation over compulsion. Gradually, this approach reshapes habitual patterns, where before the mind might chase every worry, replay every mistake, or pursue every desire, it now pauses, evaluates, and sometimes releases. The nervous energy that once defined the morning begins to dissipate as the observer within claims its role. Observing thought without reaction becomes a habit that strengthens the mind's resilience, creating a foundation for equanimity in both small moments and significant challenges. Each conscious observation reinforces the understanding that action is chosen, not compelled, and that mental freedom is cultivated through repeated engagement with awareness. Emotion and cognition are intertwined, and the way we interact with thought directly influences emotional tone. Reacting impulsively to a worry or desire often escalates anxiety, frustration, or distraction. By contrast, observation allows emotions to exist without being hijacked, creating space for reflection. The moment we recognize that the authority to act lies within us, a profound shift occurs. Stress no longer comes from the world, but from our interpretation of it. Each observation of a thought without immediate reaction reinforces a sense of agency, fostering composure, clarity, and presence. Emotional turbulence diminishes when the mind is practiced in this quiet form of vigilance, responding with discernment rather than impulse. Even when thoughts are persistent, repeated observation weakens their grip. What once demanded attention gradually loses its authority as the observer recognizes the transient nature of mental events. By distinguishing between what is real and what is imagined, the mind creates resilience against unnecessary agitation. Stoic practice is not about denying the existence of thought or desire, but about choosing where to allocate attention and energy. Each act of restraint strengthens inner stability, allowing the mind to navigate complexity with composure, even when faced with recurring or intrusive thoughts. Integration of this skill into daily life transforms perception. The simple act of noticing a thought without chasing it reverberates into every decision, every interaction, and every response. The morning unfolds less as a series of mental emergencies and more as a landscape of potential engagement, where each moment is approached with clarity and deliberation. Carl Jung's insight that your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart reminds us that self-knowledge arises from reflection, observation, and conscious engagement. By observing thoughts without immediate compliance, we cultivate insight, discernment, and a steady presence that carries into actions, decisions, and relationships. The ability to watch thought rather than obey it is foundational to a life guided by intentionality. Ultimately, freedom emerges in the space created between thought and action. Each observed thought represents a choice: to engage, to ignore, to release. The mind that practices this discernment experiences the relief of autonomy and the calm of self-mastery. The anxiety generated by imagined obligations diminishes, and the mind retains its capacity to focus on what is truly meaningful. Seneca captured this when he said, "He suffers more than necessary, who suffers before it is necessary." Observing thoughts without immediate reaction ensures that suffering is not compounded by the mind's habitual overreach. Each moment of quiet vigilance strengthens inner freedom, grounding the day in presence, clarity, and composure, and providing a stable foundation from which life can be navigated with intention rather than compelled by impulse. Contentment is often misunderstood as a prize awarded only after effort, a milestone to reach once challenges are met or success has been earned. We chase it like a horizon, believing that the mind will finally settle when circumstances align, when recognition arrives, when the pieces of life fall neatly into place. Yet this assumption obscures a vital truth. Peace is not a distant goal, but a lens through which experience can be perceived differently. The Stoics emphasized that desire and aversion are the architects of dissatisfaction, molding the mind's perception into an endless pursuit of more, of better, of yet to come. Each longing, each resistance, stretches satisfaction further away, even from moments that contain richness, if only we attend to them. By accepting the present, by cultivating awareness of what is already here, we begin to recognize that contentment is not something that the world must grant, but a posture the mind can choose. This insight reframes existence, suggesting that the architecture of satisfaction lies less in external achievement and more in the orientation of attention and judgment. The habitual narrative that happiness is earned conditions us to overlook the fullness of the immediate moment. We anticipate relief, joy, or ease as if they were reserved for the future, yet in doing so, we defer living itself. Our attention becomes invested in events and outcomes that may never come, and the vividness of the present is dulled. Within the Stoic framework, this deferral of contentment is not a trivial oversight. It is the mechanism through which unnecessary suffering arises. By perceiving fulfillment as something contingent on external factors, we grant power to conditions over which we often have little control. Carl Jung observed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, a reflection that emphasizes the present as the arena in which authenticity, satisfaction, and equilibrium can be realized. By turning attention inward, evaluating experience with clarity, and letting go of extraneous demands, the mind discovers a state of calm and completeness that does not rely on the external narrative. Recognizing contentment in the present requires a subtle, disciplined attention to how the mind evaluates experience. A delayed message, a misstep, a minor inconvenience, all are amplified by anticipation, by a mental calculus that projects need and desire onto the moment. This projection distorts perception, convincing us that the current state is deficient, incomplete, or lacking. Seneca captured this dynamic when he wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." Each mental construct that prescribes deficiency reinforces the sense that calm must be postponed. By observing how the mind inflates significance, we can choose to counterbalance projection with acknowledgement, allowing the immediate experience to reveal its intrinsic adequacy. This awareness is not passive. It requires conscious recognition that the mind often misattributes absence where there is sufficient presence, and that satisfaction is attainable without restructuring the world around us. Contentment discovered in this way is not resignation or passivity. It is not an acquiescence to circumstance that limits engagement or ambition. Instead, it is a recognition that the present is the only place where action and awareness coexist. The mind that clings to imagined deficits, that postpones peace until an ideal arrives, becomes entangled in its own constructions. Yet by seeing clearly what is before us, we create space for calm, reflection, and effective choice. Each moment contains the potential for full attention, for measured action, and for acknowledgement of what is already sufficient. When the mind reframes perception, allowing sufficiency and stability to emerge independently of circumstance, the day becomes navigable with equanimity, and contentment ceases to be conditional. The pursuit of external validation often disguises itself as the pursuit of contentment, yet it functions as a form of compulsion. We defer satisfaction, tethering it to outcomes we cannot fully control. In response, the mind experiences chronic tension, a subtle, pervasive sense that what is present is inadequate. By cultivating acceptance of the current moment, we disentangle satisfaction from outcome. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. The daily practice of noticing what is already sufficient, appreciating it, and not demanding perfection, transforms perception. The mind shifts from a reactive state dominated by external contingencies to a reflective state that recognizes the intrinsic adequacy of now. This is the foundation of durable contentment, a principle that is deeply practical and immediately actionable. Engaging with the present moment as sufficient does not mean ignoring ambition or ceasing effort. Rather, it establishes a stable context from which decisions and actions arise more clearly. The mind, unburdened by imagined deficits, possesses greater clarity, focus, and creativity. Anxiety diminishes as we recognize the distinction between aspiration and necessity, between action that is intentional and reaction that is compelled. By choosing to observe and accept the present moment, we redefine our experience of life itself, unbinding contentment from the caprices of circumstance. Each deliberate acknowledgement of sufficiency reinforces resilience, allowing us to navigate challenges without conflating them with lack. The rhythm of daily life becomes transformed when contentment is integrated into habitual perspective. Minor setbacks, frustrations, or delays lose the urgency and emotional intensity that previously consumed mental bandwidth. Awareness and deliberate acceptance replace reflexive agitation, creating a sustained sense of equilibrium. Socrates noted that an unexamined life is not worth living, and here the principle applies directly to how we interact with the present. Unexamined perception leaves us vulnerable to the compulsion of anticipation, whereas careful attention fosters calm and insight. The mind that repeatedly practices this perspective begins to recognize patterns of projection and desire and gradually habituates to a quieter, more responsive state. Each repetition strengthens neural and psychological pathways that support clarity, equanimity, and practical wisdom. Finally, the integration of present-moment contentment shapes not only inner experience but outward behavior. Decisions are more deliberate, interactions more patient, and responses to stress less reactive. The mind accustomed to framing the present as sufficient approaches challenges with composure, applying judgment to circumstance rather than being swept along by perceived deficits. Each thought, each perception, and each emotion is received fully, observed, and either engaged with deliberately or released. The practice of choosing contentment in the present is thus an exercise in autonomy, clarity, and peace. It is a principle that transforms both internal experience and external navigation, anchoring the individual in a place of enduring calm and perceptive awareness, independent of the shifting tides of circumstance. Our reactions shape life more than the events themselves, and yet it often takes practice to truly see this. A late message, an abrupt remark, a sudden delay, each is neutral in its essence. It is the interpretation, the judgment we layer over these incidents that gives them power. The mind, when left unchecked, amplifies the significance of trivial occurrences, converting minor irritations into dramas that dominate perception and emotional state. Stoicism teaches that the true source of suffering is not external, but internal, arising in the judgment, the mental elaboration we unconsciously supply. The notion of the second arrow illustrates this. The first arrow strikes when events occur, unavoidable and impersonal. The second arrow pierces through the reaction we generate. By learning to observe the first without immediately launching the second, we discover an ability to meet challenges with composure. Each pause, each conscious breath, is a small act of mastery, creating distance between stimulus and response, establishing the mind as an arena for measured engagement rather than impulsive upheaval. The power of reaction lies in choosing how to meet the moment, in shaping our own experience through intentional restraint rather than surrendering to reflex. The practice of restraint begins with awareness. Often, the initial impulse is to respond immediately, to defend, to explain, to correct, or to retaliate. These impulses, however natural, carry an emotional intensity that, when unchecked, colors the remainder of the day. Stoicism proposes that this intensity is not an inevitability, but a consequence of inattention. The mind, when unexamined, transforms minor irritations into enduring dissatisfaction. By taking a deliberate pause, we interrupt the automatic escalation of emotion, creating a temporal buffer in which clarity can emerge. Our reactions are a reflection of thought quality, and cultivating the ability to intervene in the flow of judgment establishes a foundation for enduring calm. Observing the initial stirrings of frustration, doubt, or annoyance without immediate engagement allows us to discern what truly requires action and what can be left to pass. In doing so, we reclaim authority over the emotional narrative of the day, rather than permitting external stimuli to dictate it. The morning provides an ideal environment for this cultivation. Early hours are a rare period when distractions are minimal and the mind has not yet been pulled into the swirl of external demands. By using this time to exercise restraint, to observe impulses without being driven by them, we strengthen the capacity for composure that extends throughout the day. Each instance of paused response becomes a rehearsal in mastery, reinforcing the notion that our perception, not the external event, determines the character of experience. By intervening consciously in these early experiences, the mind habituates to clarity, calm, and deliberate judgment, which can then inform responses in more complex and unpredictable scenarios. Consider how much of daily stress emerges from the assumption that immediate reaction is necessary. Social interactions, work obligations, or even simple personal routines often present impulses that demand attention. Without practice in restraint, the mind defaults to habitual engagement, frequently overvaluing minor slights or misjudging the significance of events. Each moment of observed restraint cultivates a habit of measured response, reinforcing neural pathways that support calm, clear thinking and the ability to respond appropriately rather than react compulsively. The repetition of these choices shapes both character and perception, embedding resilience into the rhythm of life itself. This disciplined attention also recalibrates expectation. When we anticipate that external events will provoke turbulence, we become preoccupied with defense, already reacting to things that have not yet occurred. By observing impulses and choosing deliberate engagement, we interrupt the predictive amplification of stress, experiencing events as they are rather than as we imagine them to be. Epictetus emphasized that no man is free who is not master of himself, a principle that underscores the profound relationship between restraint and autonomy. The mind, when practiced in measured response, exercises agency over perception, reducing vulnerability to the unpredictable and allowing experience to unfold without unnecessary emotional distortion. Each instance of composure, repeated and reinforced, forms the scaffolding for a life less dictated by reaction and more guided by reason. Finally, the cultivation of restraint in daily life transforms experience at both subtle and profound levels. The mind trained to pause, observe, and act deliberately navigates the day with composure and clarity. Minor inconveniences lose their disproportionate emotional charge, interactions become more harmonious, and decisions reflect deliberate judgment rather than reflexive emotion. Each observed reaction becomes a step toward freedom, reinforcing the central Stoic insight that the events themselves do not determine suffering, but the mind's engagement with them does. Over time, this disciplined practice establishes a resilient, centered approach to life, where clarity, calm, and intentionality guide every choice and interaction, creating a consistent inner framework from which the day can be navigated with steadiness and insight. The mind often begins its day not in the clarity of the present, but under the weight of yesterday. Unfinished conversations replay like echoes, mistakes linger in memory, and subtle regrets settle into the corners of awareness. These remnants are not mere background noise. They shape perception, influence mood, and direct energy away from what is immediate and actionable. Stoic practice teaches that clinging to the past is a form of self-imposed burden, a weight that the mind carries without necessity. The events themselves are neutral, fleeting, and beyond our control, yet the mind's attachment transforms them into chains that restrict presence. By consciously releasing these residues, even momentarily, we reclaim the space necessary for deliberate action, calm reflection, and purposeful engagement. The morning before the day's demands fully emerge provides a unique window for this practice, a time when observation and choice can shape the tone for all that follows. Letting go requires more than mere acknowledgement. It requires an active decision to place what has ended into the domain of irrelevance, freeing the mind to inhabit the now. The mind, habituated to replaying the past, often interprets memory as necessity, creating the illusion that attention must remain tethered to what is gone. The practice of release is therefore a deliberate redirection of cognitive energy, a reclaiming of capacity that can be devoted to meaningful engagement in the present. By letting yesterday remain where it belongs, we restore the balance of attention and conserve mental resources for the unfolding day. Reflection becomes a ritual, a repeated exercise that reinforces the separation between what is finished and what is active, ensuring that the mind is not burdened by obsolete narratives. Even minor attachments to the past shape emotional tone. lingering frustrations or unresolved tensions when left unchecked, color perception, intensify reaction, and increase susceptibility to stress. The mental echo of past events can amplify minor challenges of the present, creating a cascade of unnecessary anxiety. The simple act of acknowledgement, followed by conscious release, disrupts this cycle. By consistently practicing this separation, the mind develops resilience, learning that neither regret nor nostalgia must dominate experience. Awareness of the boundary between what has passed and what is immediate becomes a tool for cultivating stability, enabling a more considered, responsive, and calm engagement with life. The rhythm of release can be cultivated through small, deliberate practices. One may begin the day with a simple inward review, noting the residual concerns of yesterday, silently acknowledging them, and then intentionally letting them recede. This is not avoidance but recognition, a conscious act of delegation, assigning yesterday to the realm of what cannot be altered while permitting attention to the present. If energy is devoted to the past, the opportunity to inhabit, enjoy, and respond to the present diminishes. By releasing attachment, we increase availability of both emotional and cognitive resources, establishing a platform for calm, effective action and thoughtful reflection. The interplay between thought and attachment is subtle but profound. Rumination is often mistaken for productive reflection, yet it tends to distort perception, magnify threats, and perpetuate emotional turbulence. The mind interprets repetition as urgency, replaying events as if their continued presence in consciousness is necessary for survival or learning. Epictetus highlighted this dynamic when he wrote, "It's not events themselves that disturb people, but the judgments about them." By separating memory from judgment, by observing the residue of the past without feeding it with continued evaluation, we neutralize the emotional charge it carries. Each act of mental release strengthens awareness, teaching the mind that freedom resides not in the alteration of past events, but in the deliberate management of attention and response. As we cultivate this capacity, the benefits extend into all aspects of daily life. The mind, unburdened by past regrets, responds with clarity rather than reactivity, perceives challenges with composure, and interacts with others from a place of centeredness. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Awareness of the impermanence of both past and present refines perception, ensuring that attention is aligned with what is meaningful, necessary, and controllable. By releasing the grip on yesterday, we allow intention to guide behavior, creating a more manageable, composed, and effective approach to daily life. This practice also intersects with self-compassion and understanding. Holding on to past missteps or regrets often fuels self-criticism, creating tension that undermines the mind's natural equilibrium. The act of release requires acknowledging imperfections without attaching identity or worth to them, understanding that mistakes and outcomes do not define the entirety of self. Each moment spent releasing the past is a conscious act of refinement, training the mind to operate from a position of insight, balance, and calm, rather than reactionary fixation. Gradually, the habit of letting go transforms perception of both time and self. The early morning becomes not a period of residual chaos, but a stage for clarity, intention, and engagement. Minor frustrations lose disproportionate significance, and the mind develops confidence in its capacity to navigate each moment without dragging unnecessary weight forward. Aristotle reflected that patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. And here, the patience exercised in releasing yesterday's burdens yields a day experienced with calm, attention, and precision. Each ritual of acknowledgement and release deepens the mind's resilience, strengthens focus, and reinforces the understanding that life is most fully inhabited when attention is dedicated to what is present, rather than ensnared by what has already passed. Ultimately, the process of morning release is both practical and philosophical. It cultivates calm, fosters awareness, and refines the ability to act with clarity in each moment. By consistently separating thought from attachment, observation from judgment, the mind develops a steady capacity for presence, equanimity, and intentional engagement. Epictetus emphasized that man is not worried by real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems, illuminating the ongoing relevance of release as a tool to prevent needless suffering. Each day, approached with this awareness, becomes lighter, more manageable, and richer in clarity, offering a foundation upon which deliberate action, thoughtful reflection, and a calm, measured response can be constructed. Kindness toward oneself is often mistaken for weakness or indulgence, yet it is one of the most profound tools for cultivating resilience. The mind, when steeped in harsh judgment, amplifies every flaw, every delay, every perceived shortcoming, creating a constant undercurrent of tension that shapes perception and decision-making. Early in the morning, before the demands of the world press upon us, this inner dialogue can dominate the tenor of the day. Stoicism reminds us that inner turbulence arises less from circumstances than from the way we interpret and react to them. By approaching ourselves with patience and compassion, we create a stabilizing foundation that permits clearer judgment, more deliberate action, and a sense of steadiness that ripples outward into interactions, choices, and perception. Recognizing the value of the self as a companion rather than an adversary transforms routine mornings into a practice in cultivating composure and inner strength. The process of self-kindness is subtle, requiring attentiveness and practice. The mind has a natural tendency to critique, to measure, and to assign value based on performance or perceived adequacy. Each unkind thought reinforces tension, creating a feedback loop where judgment begets anxiety, which in turn fosters further judgment. Breaking this cycle requires conscious intervention, acknowledging the inner critique without allowing it to dictate emotional state, responding with intentional patience, and cultivating the awareness that imperfection is a constant, not a failure. In recognizing and attending to the mind's self-critical tendencies rather than suppressing or ignoring them, we illuminate the mechanisms that fuel inner turbulence, creating space to replace harshness with gentle awareness. This deliberate attention is neither passive nor indulgent. It is a form of mental cultivation that strengthens clarity, resilience, and the capacity for intentional action. The benefits of cultivating self-kindness manifest immediately in the rhythms of daily experience. The early moments of the day, when energy is abundant, yet often fragmented by worry or self-reproach, become a laboratory for practicing equanimity. Acknowledging mistakes without attaching identity or worth, observing lapses without judgment, and accepting the imperfection inherent in being human allows the mind to operate with less friction. Each moment of self-kindness is a choice to stabilize the mind, creating the conditions for deliberate engagement with tasks, relationships, and challenges. By fostering internal steadiness, we align perception with reality, ensuring that our actions emerge from clarity rather than compulsion or reactivity. Over time, these moments accumulate, forming a habitual capacity for patience, insight, and resilience that colors the entire day and strengthens the individual against unforeseen challenges. Inner kindness is also deeply intertwined with emotional regulation. When we respond to ourselves with gentleness, the emotional tone of our day shifts. Criticism and self-reproach tend to magnify irritability, diminish focus, and increase susceptibility to stress. By contrast, compassionate attention reduces the intensity of negative emotion, allowing reflection to emerge where previously only agitation existed. Epictetus highlighted this dynamic, noting, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Self-mastery begins with internal kindness, establishing a calm center from which the mind can evaluate, interpret, and act with discretion. The act of treating oneself with patience is therefore not a concession to comfort, but a prerequisite for exercising autonomy over judgment, response, and action. It shapes not only the internal landscape, but also external interactions, as the steadiness cultivated inwardly manifests outwardly in decisions, responses, and relationships. The interplay of self-kindness and cognition is equally crucial. Harsh judgment distorts perception, exaggerates shortcomings, and creates a lens through which experience is interpreted as threatening or insufficient. This distortion impacts decision-making, often leading to overcorrection, hesitation, or overextension. By practicing internal gentleness, we allow thought to proceed unclouded by reactive self-critique, fostering discernment, insight, and clarity. Marcus Aurelius reflected on this integration of mind and perception. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. The estimate we apply to experience originates in our habitual interpretations, and cultivating a practice of self-kindness recalibrates this lens, reducing unnecessary emotional weight and facilitating reasoned, deliberate responses to events and interactions. Self-kindness also informs the development of resilience. Life presents repeated challenges, many of which are unavoidable, and the mind's response to these challenges shapes long-term stability and growth. When the self is treated harshly, difficulties feel amplified, emotional endurance diminishes, and the capacity for insight is compromised. By contrast, approaching challenges from a foundation of internal support allows the mind to engage with complexity without succumbing to disproportionate reaction. Applied inwardly, this suggests that the relationship with the self is dynamic. The quality of attention, care, and patience we extend toward ourselves influences the transformation of thought, emotion, and action. Each practice of gentleness strengthens resilience, reinforcing the mind's capacity to navigate adversity while maintaining equilibrium. The daily cultivation of internal kindness also reshapes habitual thought patterns. Where self-criticism might have prompted fixation on errors, impulsive judgment, or repetitive worry, deliberate compassion creates space for constructive reflection, problem-solving, and clarity of perception. Aristotle's insight, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all, emphasizes the integration of cognition and emotional guidance. Internal kindness allows the mind to operate efficiently, filtering out unnecessary noise while preserving attention for decisions that matter. This equilibrium ensures that emotional intensity is appropriate, judgment is measured, and responses are deliberate, all of which contribute to a foundation of stability and calm that permeates daily experience. Finally, integrating self-kindness into the rhythm of the morning anchors the day in steadiness and intentionality. Each act of patient attention, each decision to observe rather than judge, reinforces a habitual capacity for calm and insight. This inner stability radiates outward, informing decisions, interactions, and perceptions throughout the day. By attending to the self with compassion, the mind cultivates resilience, focus, and equanimity, creating a continuous foundation for intentional living. Each morning becomes an opportunity to strengthen this inner steadiness, to shape perception and response through deliberate practice, and to approach life with a calm clarity that is cultivated rather than imposed, offering a profound basis for enduring presence and thoughtful engagement with the world. Awareness is the cornerstone of control, more than effort, more than willpower. Many attempt to impose calm through sheer force, believing that the mind can be tamed like an unruly servant. Yet such attempts often backfire, creating tension, resistance, and even subtle fatigue. The mind, when pressured, tends to rebel or scatter attention rather than submit, revealing that control through force is a fragile illusion. True mastery emerges when attention is directed inward, observing the flow of thought without judgment, noticing impulses without reacting, and recognizing the boundaries between what is within our influence and what lies beyond it. This mindful orientation allows clarity to arise naturally, shaping perception and action in ways that brute effort never can. The Stoics recognized that internal order precedes external effectiveness, that the measure of a day is not in its productivity alone, but in the composure and discernment cultivated within the mind. By grounding the day in awareness rather than compulsion, we establish a framework for action that is measured, intentional, and sustainable, allowing the ordinary routines of morning to transform into practices of mastery over thought rather than domination over circumstance. The process of cultivating awareness begins with noticing the habitual tendencies of the mind. Thoughts arise incessantly, each competing for attention, and the instinctive response is to engage, resist, or redirect. Yet when we attempt to control the mind through sheer will, we often reinforce the cycle of tension rather than break it. Instead, the practice of observation without compulsion shifts the locus of control inward, allowing the mind to settle naturally into rhythm and clarity. Mastery is therefore not imposed from outside, but cultivated from within, through patient awareness and repeated practice. By consistently observing thought and feeling without judgment, the mind develops a stable center, a point from which action arises deliberately rather than reactively, and from which attention is directed to what truly matters in the unfolding day. The ordinary tasks of the morning, often approached as obligations to be completed, offer fertile ground for this practice. Preparing a meal, washing, walking, or reviewing the day's responsibilities can become exercises in presence when executed with mindful attention. Each gesture, each breath, each movement offers an opportunity to anchor attention in the present rather than projecting into future outcomes or dwelling on past concerns. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. By turning attention inward, even during the most mundane activities, we cultivate insight, presence, and clarity that would otherwise remain obscured by habitual distraction. The simplicity of these practices masks their potency. Small acts of awareness accumulate into a robust capacity for composure, discernment, and calm throughout the day. Effort, when untethered from awareness, often creates a paradoxical tension. The mind that strives without observation becomes anxious, reactive, and fragmented. By contrast, when effort is informed by awareness, it transforms into a natural extension of attention rather than a coercive imposition. Marcus Aurelius reflected on this integration of effort and perception. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Awareness allows obstacles, interruptions, or challenges to be met without the anxiety that accompanies forced effort. Each act becomes a measured response, executed with consideration and clarity rather than impulsive urgency. The ordinary routines of the morning, under this lens, shift from being tasks to complete under pressure to intentional exercises in mindful engagement, each gesture reinforcing the mind's capacity for stability and composure. The cultivation of awareness also reshapes our relationship with control. External events are unpredictable, often impermanent, and frequently beyond influence. Yet by observing the internal landscape, the flow of thought, the emergence of impulses, the reactions that arise, control is established where it truly matters. Observing the mind without forcing it allows insight into these appraisals, fostering discernment and reducing the tendency to react compulsively. Awareness becomes a lens through which the external world is engaged intentionally, preserving energy, composure, and judgment for situations that genuinely require intervention, rather than being expended on imagined urgencies or projections. Emotion and cognition are deeply interwoven, and awareness serves as a stabilizing force within this interplay. Immediate, unexamined reactions often escalate stress, intensify anxiety, or compromise decision-making. By cultivating conscious observation, The mind is permitted to process stimuli without being hijacked by impulsive affect. Each observed impulse, each moderated response, reinforces internal stability and cultivates resilience. Over time, this practice embeds habits of attentional clarity and emotional composure that transform ordinary experience into an arena for reasoned engagement rather than reactive turmoil. The principle of awareness also informs the alignment of values and action. When attention is conscious and directed inward, actions naturally reflect judgment, ethics, and deliberate choice. Plato's observation that the beginning is the most important part of the work resonates here. How the day begins, how attention is anchored in awareness, sets the tone for the unfolding of thought, behavior, and perception. Small, consistent acts of reflection, observation, and mindful action during morning routines cascade into broader patterns, shaping decisions, responses, and interactions in ways that embody integrity, intentionality, and calm. Awareness transforms each act from mechanical execution into deliberate engagement, fostering coherence between mind, intention, and external action. Finally, the cumulative effect of practicing awareness in the morning establishes a foundation for sustained clarity and composure. Each repeated act of observing thought, modulating response, and directing attention inward strengthens neural and psychological pathways that support resilience, focus, and equanimity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do." Awareness anchors the mind in this principle, preserving calm, fostering reasoned action, and cultivating an internal sense of sovereignty over perception. The ordinary routines of morning, transformed into practices of attentional mastery, provide a framework for navigating life with intention rather than reactivity, effort without strain, and action guided by clarity rather than urgency. This is the essence of Stoic practice. Internal mastery through sustained conscious awareness, shaping experience from the inside outward and transforming the mind into a source of strength, steadiness, and discernment that carries throughout every moment of the day. Remember, calm is not something distant or to be earned. It is already here, waiting quietly in the space between thought and action. Every choice you make, every pause you take, is an act of mastery over your own mind, a step toward living with clarity, presence, and purpose. Take that stillness with you and let it guide your day. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal and for practicing presence alongside us. If you want to continue this journey, watch one of the suggested videos on the screen to deepen your understanding and strengthen the calm you carry into life.